Hi guys, welcome back. We're on week 3 of distance learning, which means that we're doing week 3 of our memoirs lesson. Before we actually get started on what we're going to learn this week, I want to go over some housekeeping rules. First and foremost, this is exactly where you can reach me. This page is always in our PowerPoints. It's on Google Classroom. It's on my Instagram page. I've sent it out through Remind, but I'm going to reiterate this. Please follow me on Instagram at MissCondeHSH and add me on Remind. Depending on your period, enter this number up at the top of your phone if you're going to send a text message, and depending on your period, put in one of these codes. Please sign into the appropriate period. I don't just want you guys on Google Classroom. It's important that you guys also add me on Remind or Instagram because I update those two platforms every single day based on anything that has to do with distance learning. And we meet on Zoom, the video chat app, every Monday and Wednesday, and I send you the code to join our Zoom chats through Remind. So it's important that you guys have me on Remind because joining Zoom is part of a grade. So if you've seen like a 0 in the grade book for you, it's probably because you haven't been joining the Zoom chats. My office hours are 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. So if you have any questions, please reach me at that time. I know all of you guys actually sleep during this time because I barely get any messages from you. I get messages from you at like 1 p.m. But please just try to maintain a proper schedule. Wake up at 8 a.m. That way you finish your work earlier. You can have the rest of the day for free. Either way, just my office hours are 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. So reach out to me during that time. I will still answer you afterward either way. Finally, Reading Plus is still due every Sunday. Make sure you are doing 3 C-Reader lessons every Sunday. By every Sunday, you have to be in the green 80% or above. And if you have any friends that you know are not participating in Reading Plus, please reach out to them, or not just Reading Plus and distance learning. Please reach out to them. It's important that they know that we are still in school. We are in the 4th quarter, grades still matter. So reach out to them, tell them to get their stuff done, okay? So today, we are gonna go over what our lesson is. Today should be April 13th. You should be watching this on April 13th. This is our lesson for the week of April 13th to April 17th. This is lesson 3 of the memoir lesson that we've been learning with Michelle Obama's Becoming Memoir and learning about figurative language. And so we're going to go over our objective. Our objective for this week is that you will be able to determine how to show, not tell, in a narrative piece. And we're going to go over that in part 2 of this video. And you're also going to be able to plan and write a first draft of a personal memoir piece using figurative language and memoir conventions. So by the end of this week, the assignments that you guys have to do for me is one quick assignment on showing, not telling, which, like I said, you will be learning how to do that in part 2 of these videos. You're planning for your personal memoir piece. Yes, you do have to plan, and yes, it's worth a grade. And you're going to be writing your first draft of the memoir piece. It's not your final draft, it is your first draft, because I will be giving you feedback and giving you a chance next week to fix whatever it is that you need fixing, whatever it is that you need to revise, and then you're going to be able to submit to me again for a final grade. So we're going to go over the standards really quick that we're going to hit upon in this lesson. So we're doing last 910 RI 2.4 again. This is just reviewing figurative language. And then we're jumping into our writing standards. So when you see the W in these standards, it means that we're jumping into writing. So instead of doing argumentative or informational, we're actually doing narrative writing. And narrative writing, we're going to go into it a little bit more in a second, but narrative writing is simply writing something about a personal event or an experience that you've gone through. And so that's what you're doing when you're writing your memoir piece. So jumping into our lesson schedule, right? So this is a suggested schedule for the week of April 13th through the 17th. We have Monday, which is today. So today you should be watching this video Monday, April 13th. The first thing that you need to do is watch this video, right? Watch Memoirs lesson 3 video. So there are 2 parts to these videos. It's part 1 and part 2. This is part 1. Part 2 should be up on Google Classroom as well, so you need to watch both parts. Then you should, by the end of today, Monday, complete part 1 of Memoirs lesson 3. Do not submit the assignment. All I'm giving you is a suggested time frame for when you should do all the parts. So by the end of today, you should have part 1 done, right? It's the show, don't tell assignment. And like I said, you're gonna learn more about that in part 2 of these videos. Tuesday, tomorrow, you should complete part 2 of Memoirs lesson 3, which is your planning sheet. And we're gonna go over how to plan and what I expect in your planning sheet. And then you should begin writing the first draft of your personal memoir. You don't have to finish it, but you should begin writing it by tomorrow. Then Wednesday, okay, Wednesday we're meeting on Zoom. You guys know those the 3 sessions that I put up. I'm gonna put them up again on Instagram. I send them through Remind. Please remember to join Zoom during any of those sessions. And during our Zoom meeting, I expect you to come to our Zoom meeting with questions regarding the memoir assignment, okay? I need you guys to ask me questions, because if you guys are confused about something, I would rather clarify it face-to-face versus through the Remind messages and all of that. So it's important that you guys come to these Zoom meetings ready with questions to ask me about your assignments. And then your goal for that day is to continue working on the first draft of the memoir. Then Thursday, as you see, Thursday is our last day here. Thursday, you're gonna finalize your first draft of the memoir, and you're gonna submit your first draft of the memoir page. Now, the first draft is in the same handout as Memoirs lesson 3. It's the Memoirs lesson 3 handout. You're gonna do the show, don't tell assignment, the planning, and the first draft. All of that is on the same handout. So all 3 parts are due by Thursday, which means 2 things. 1, they need to be submitted by Thursday. 2, you get Friday off. You don't have an assignment due Friday, so now you have Friday off, okay? And the reason for this is because it gives me enough time to read through your memoirs, give you guys feedback, so that way by the following Monday, April 20th, you guys get your assignments back, and you can work on fixing anything based on my notes. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start. Quick review. We've been learning for the past 2 weeks what a memoir is, right? So a memoir, like memory, is a truthful account of a specific moment in a person's life. I gave you guys an example of the Night memoir that we read at the beginning of the year. It's a truthful account of what happened in his life during the time in the concentration camps. So unlike an autobiography that is from the moment a person is born until they finish writing the story, a memoir is about a very specific moment in a person's life, a very specific memory, and it's very honest and truthful. It's not made up. Memoirs focus on a theme throughout their story, and it's very important that when you guys write your memoirs, you're focusing on a theme as well, and we're going to go over that again in a second. When writing, ask yourself, what is the message I'm trying to convey? So keep asking yourself as you're writing your memoir piece, what is the message I'm trying to convey to my audience? What am I trying to tell them? Number 4, a memoir is typically told in first person point of view. Now this is very important, okay? First person is using the word I. So when writing your memoir, you're going to be writing about yourself. It's your story. You're telling me about something that happened to you, okay? I don't want to hear about the point of view of your aunt or your cousin or your best friend or your boyfriend. I need to know your point of view. There can be other characters, and there need to be other characters in your memoir, but I need to hear it from your point of view, which means that your memoir is going to use a lot of I. When we write argumentative informational essays, I tell you not to use the word I. But in this narrative writing, you are going to use the word I. I need to see the word I. And then finally, typically memoirs will focus on the relationship between the writer and another person or set of people. So it's important to note that it's not just a story about yourself. Yes, it's your story, but it's your story and your relationship with someone else or an event that changed your life in some way. And typically other people are in those events that shape us in one way or another. So it's important to note that other people still need to be in your story, even if they're not the main characters, because it's still your story. And we're going to look at an example at the end of this video that's going to show you how to do that. All right. So how do you structure a memoir? Everyone has a story that is central to your identity. The question you're answering when writing your memoir is that. What story has shaped who you've become, right? What is the story that is central to your identity? That's what you're answering when you write your memoir piece. What story has shaped who you've become as a person? Who are you now, and what made you become that way? What story shaped you into becoming that person? Or who influenced you to become that person? 2, you gotta pick a theme. It's very important that when you're writing this memoir piece, you pick your theme. So your memoir will center around a main message you want the reader to understand. You have to know what message you're sending to your reader, because you can't just start writing and write random stuff and then not have a specific message that you want your reader to understand by the end of it, or even a message that you learned a lesson that you learned by the end of your story, right? Memoirs are about self-discovery. They're about understanding ourselves a little better and about letting other people into our lives a little bit. So it's important that you guys pick a theme for your story and that you know that theme and it shows up throughout the entire story. Now, I'm not asking you to put the theme in the story like my theme is la 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 la. No, I just need that theme to be present in a subtle way. All right, so narrative storytelling, we're going to start this. This is something a little bit new, but narrative storytelling is basically just writing memoirs. And so when writing your memoir, you'll be writing a narrative, and a narrative is a written account of events. So just telling me what happened at some point in your life. Like any story, narratives have to have a purposeful beginning, middle, and end. So you guys have to keep this in mind as you're writing your memoirs. You can't just write a story about a time that you went to the supermarket to buy milk. You need to have, it needs to be a real written account of something that happened to you that was important to you, that shaped who you became. And you can't just write one random piece of it and then miss out on the end or miss out on the beginning of the story. I need to know what happens, just like with any story, just like with when we write our essays, right? We need an intro, our body, our conclusion. Your narrative story, your memoir piece also needs multiple paragraphs. You need to explain to me what's going on in the beginning. You need to explain to me what's going on in the middle of your story. You need to explain to me what's going on at the end of your story. It's important that you know that it's not just something random that you're putting in there. It's not just, oh, my sister was born, the end. Tell me a little bit more about that. Okay, your sister was born. How did that change you, though? Explain that at the end of your story or in the middle. Bring in emotions. And we're going to learn more about how to do that in part 2, because that's part of the show don't tell technique. And your memoir must include characters, setting, conflict, and a resolution. We're going to go over what that is right now. So we have characters. In a narrative, characters are the people in your story, including yourself. Memoir writing focuses on real life people. So when we read Romeo and Juliet, they were made up characters by Shakespeare. They didn't exist. The story wasn't real. Romeo and Juliet weren't actually a thing. But in memoir writing, like in Michelle Obama's memoir piece, these characters are real. So they're real life people. And in your life, you have characters in your life that are real, right? So when you write your memoir, you're going to have characters, but they're real life people that you've dealt with, like your mom, your dad, a grandparent, a cousin, a best friend. These are all the characters in your story. And of course, you have to include yourself. You are the main character. It is your story. So you do have to include yourself in the character list. In Michelle Obama's memoir, for instance, we have Michelle Obama as the main character. She's telling the story. It's her life. She also mentions a group of friends. She doesn't really name them, but she mentions her friends. Those are also characters. She mentions her teacher, her mom, and her brother. And she mentions all of them, and they become characters in her story, characters that have helped her and shaped her and influenced her in some way, especially her mom, because that's her focus throughout the memoir, how her mom influenced her life to help her become who she became, the successful person she is now. Then we have setting. Setting is where your story takes place. Okay, so we have, when you write your memoir, you have to tell me, where is it taking place? Are we in Homestead? Are we in Miami? Are we in another state? Did this happen in another state? Are we in school, right? Homestead Middle. Sometimes it's not even the city where it is. Sometimes it's the place, right? Are we at home? Are we at school? As writers, you need to describe where your story is taking place and when it's happening. When is very important. I need to know when it's happening. Did this happen to you when you were 5 years old, when you were 6 years old, when you were 12 years old? Is it happening to you right now? I need to know when it's happening, because as readers, we want to put ourselves in your position. We want to be able to understand your story the best way we can. And in order to do that, you as writers have to help us understand when and where it's happening. That's why setting is so important. Then we have the conflict. And conflict we went over when we were learning about Romeo and Juliet. So we're going to review this really quick. Conflict is the main problem of the story. So every narrative, right, and memoir needs a central conflict that drives the story forward. So when writing your memoir, you need a conflict. Now, conflict can range from extremely dramatic and intense to not that dramatic and intense. I'm going to give you two examples right now. In the memoir piece that we read at the beginning of the year, Night, the main conflict, if you guys remember, he is a young 15-year-old boy who is in a concentration camp with his father, and they have to go through selection, which is when the Nazi officers decide who is going to go into the gas chambers and who is going to live another day. And his father gets chosen for selection. So he's afraid that his father is going to die. The main conflict in that story is that his father gets chosen for selection. The main problem when we read that memoir is that the father might die. And so he's terrified that he's going to end up alone because his mother and his sister already died. So that is the main conflict of that story. Now, that is a very intense conflict, but it's a conflict nonetheless. In Michelle Obama's memoir, the main conflict is not that intense. The main conflict is that people in her neighborhood, or the people outside of her neighborhood, see where she grew up and see her school as ghetto and not good enough. And so that's a conflict that affects her, and it affected how she grew up, but it's not a conflict that's extremely dramatic or life or death the way that the Night narrative is. And so when we have conflicts, we also have resolution. So resolution is the solution to our problems, the solution to our conflict. In all narratives, the story must conclude with a solution to the central conflict. So as you write, I need you guys to pay attention to what your conflict is and what your resolution is, okay? How did your problem get fixed? Now, sometimes, and we're going to see in the example that we're going to read a little later, sometimes the resolution isn't so black and white, and it's not so easy to come by, and sometimes some problems aren't easily fixed. So our resolution is just how our problem got fixed. In the Night memoir, thankfully the dad ends up surviving selection and he gets to live another day. And so Eli Wiesel, who was the writer of Night, he survives with his dad and he doesn't end up alone. In the Michelle Obama memoir, our conflict was that the school had a bad reputation. The school in her neighborhood had a bad reputation. And so what did the school do to fix that? The resolution was that they created a gifted program that Michelle Obama joined, and then it helped her become the successful person that she is now, right? Because it fueled her competitive streak, it gave her the ability to create her own schedule at school, and it gave her a kind of advantage at that school that allowed her to succeed more. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to review figurative language in part 2 of this video, so please watch part 2 and we'll finish off this PowerPoint. But I want to go over, I'll also go over the assignments, by the way, in part 2. So make sure that in part 2 you're watching that video as well. Please watch both videos, because in part 2 I go over exactly what it is that I expect from you in the assignments. So what we're going to do now is we're going to read this example of a memoir that a student wrote, and we're going to annotate it. You're going to annotate, well, I'm going to annotate it for you. And the annotated version is going to be up on Google Classroom. So you should have that with my notes on it that we're going to come up with right now, right? So like any memoir, it has to start with a title. So this is the title, right? It's important to know that a memoir needs to have a title because you guys need to come up with one. And it's important to note that our title has to have something to do with the story. Please do not make it Memoir 1 or Frederick's memoir. It needs to be a title that has something to do with the story. So It Got Lost in the Move is the title of this memoir. We're going to read about it. And as we read, I want you guys to pay attention to the characters, the conflict, the resolution, and the setting of the story. And I'm going to highlight for those things as we read, okay? So it goes, even though I have 3 sisters and a brother, I was raised as an only child. Because my parents divorced when I was so young, I don't really remember living with older siblings bossing me around. I got to be the only child in a room with adults. I was the precocious little girl who carried on conversations as if she was grown up. Most people think that only children are all spoiled, that they get everything they ask for, that toys flow on Christmas mornings, that birthdays are national holidays. That wasn't really my case, but I never felt I was missing out on something. I had a hard time understanding why we moved so much though. Every year, like clockwork, my mother would sit down with me, always at eye level, and tell me that she found a new and better place for us. She always knew how to make a sad situation seem like an adventure. So we're going to stop there. It's 4 paragraphs. So we're going to stop after the second paragraph. We're going to go over some things. So first and foremost, we know that she is the main character, right? So we have our character. So I is the main character, right? Then she has 3 sisters and a brother, but she was raised as an only child. So she mentions that she has siblings, but they're obviously not in it because she's talking about how she was raised as an only child. So then she talks about how her parents were divorced. She got to be the only child in a room with adults, and she was a little girl. So that also tells us the setting. So it tells us when this was happening. So it was happening when she was a little girl. Most people think that only children are all spoiled, that they get everything they ask for. That wasn't really my case, but I never felt I was missing out on something. I had a hard time understanding why we moved so much though. So this is already introducing the conflict. I had a hard time understanding why we moved so much. It's a problem to her. She's not sure why they're moving too much, and based on the language, it obviously seems like she doesn't like it. And then every year, like clockwork, my mother would sit down with me. So her mother is in her life. She's the one raising her. So her mother here is a character, right? She always knew how to make a sad situation seem like an adventure. So then we have, I came to hate moving as much as I hated broccoli, and that already shows us the conflict. She hates moving. The problem of the story is that she hates moving. So we have our main conflict here. With every move, dozens of my toys would disappear. I would get to our new home and my new room would not find one of my toys. I messed that part. I would get to our new home and my new room and not find one of my toys. I would ask my mother where one of my toys was, and she would always answer, it got lost in the move. I especially remember strawberry shortcake rag doll, those that are imprinted in cheap fabric to be sewn and stuffed. I think it was my grandmother who got it for me, but I cannot be sure. I loved that doll. I had Barbies and other toys. I didn't know how poor we really were, but this rag doll was everything to me. And in one of our many moves, I can't really say which one or how old I was. I can't even remember the house where we were moving to or from. I just know what happened. Strawberry shortcake disappeared. And so we get to our central conflict. So our central conflict is the main problem of the story. Our other conflict is that she hates moving. But what is the biggest problem here? That her favorite toy disappeared. So our central conflict is that her favorite toy disappeared. So now we have to get to a resolution, right? So when I was a senior in high school, and that tells us a setting as well, right? Right here. So this is when it was happening. So setting, when she was a senior. So that's about 17 or 18 years old. So she goes from a little girl to being a senior, right? So a lot of years have passed. So it helps us understand the time, how much time has passed in the story. So when I was a senior in high school, I used to visit my grandmother every Tuesday and Thursday. So there she has her grandmother. That's another character that we have in the story. I can still smell the freshly brewed coffee that would greet me before her. I can still hear the afternoon telenovela that still surprises me she likes to watch. On a random Thursday, and for no real reason, she had a present for me. She had found the fabric for the strawberry shortcake rag doll and made me a new one. I cried so hard. I was happy for the new one and sad for the lost, and until then, almost forgotten one. I came home excited. I couldn't wait to show the doll to my mom. We talked for a while about having to move so many times, and I told her how heartbroken I got every time one of my toys got lost in one of those horrid moves, and she laughed. She laughed so hard I thought she might actually die of laughter. Tears ran down her red face, and she almost couldn't breathe. It took her a while, but she stopped. She took a deep breath and said, "Oh, honey," her voice just a hint of sympathy. "They didn't get lost. I threw them away. All I could do was cry." And so right there at the end, it's not the happiest ending, but we get our resolution, right? She finally figures out what happened to all her toys. What happened to the strawberry shortcake toy that she loved so much? Her mom threw them away, right? So that is the resolution to our conflict. Our central conflict is that she keeps losing all these toys, especially her favorite one, the strawberry shortcake toy. And now we get our resolution, which is that she finds out what happened to her toys. So this is an example memoir piece, and this is something like what I expect from you guys. It's not that difficult. It's just a small moment in the student's life. And she uses a lot of figurative language, which we will go over in the second part to this video. So I will be posting the annotated version of this on Google Classroom, so please make sure that you're also reading through that. And make sure that you watch the second video to get more information on the assignments that are due this week and to learn about showing and not telling when we talk about narrative writing. All right, so I'll see you in the next video, and goodbye.